Flight sim rudders. They're a pretty simple thing, and I've had my feet on most of them, but these rudders from Virtual Fly are a little bit special, and it's for a few reasons that you might not think. So let's dive a little bit deeper and find out what makes these rudders unlike anything else in the market. This product was supplied for testing and review purposes. Virtual Fly have no creative control over this video. Out of the box, the rudders look absolutely gorgeous. I don't think anyone can argue with that. Inspired by what they tell me is a Cessna 172 or 182. In fact, they look that good, you'd almost think they had been ripped right out of a commercial sim. And in some respects, they kinda have, because the rudders are used in all of Virtual Fly's commercial training sims. Looking at them closer, the first word that comes to mind is bomb-proof. I reckon this could be some of the highest build quality I've ever seen in a flight sim rudder. This is the kind of product that you can expect to last a lifetime. If there's anyone here with long-term experience of the rudders, shout out in the comments, share your experience and let everyone know how they're holding up. Let's start off with the 5mm thick steel base plate. When screwed down to a full cockpit, it becomes incredibly rigid and gives you a nice, smooth platform to guide your heels along, making it easy for those fine inputs. Moving on to what you might call the chassis of the rudders. It's a full box design, creating a super rigid structure. Overbuilt might even be an understatement. We can take the cover off here by unscrewing a few of these small bolts. From the inside, we can see a series of springs and rails for the rudder mechanism. It comes with some extra springs that you can swap out, but I found the pre-installed ones just right for what I needed, so I ended up going back to the stock setup. And also this is the same for the brakes, but the brakes have something super special up their sleeve, which we'll get to in a bit. You'll notice there's no damper in here, and that did catch me off guard, being that some of the cheaper rudder pedals on the market can be fitted with an adjustable damper, just adding to the sense of weight. But does this actually matter? To my surprise, no. On the cheaper rudder sets, I feel like the damper is needed to provide a bit of substance, but with the rudders, I didn't really feel the need for it. Look, you never really know, but all I can say is I never felt like there was anything missing. Another nice thing is there seems to be no detent, like absolutely nothing. You know, when you're crossing over that inflection point, just through the middle, you normally get some sort of notch feeling. Sometimes it's sharp, sometimes it's muted. Well, it's non-existent in the rudders. It's very smooth all the way through. The benefit of that is being able to put extremely fine inputs into the rudder around that central position. Now for its next trick. If you look close here, you can see the rudders can achieve a true linear travel on the pedals. The pedals move on these steel runners, which are smooth and have some sort of like lube or coating to them. There's a hinge in the middle that transfers the input, and you can see how the bearing is allowed to move freely inside the notch. This is how they've done it. This is how the Ruddo Plus can achieve a full linear travel. As far as I'm aware, this is unique, and they're the only rudders on the market other than the force feedback Brunners that have opted for this authentic way of moving the rudder pedals. Now, all that seems very minor. Most people, even me, before this video was like, so what? Who kind of cares? Rotating around an axis versus linear travel? Well, there is a difference, and you can feel it. Not having your feet swing through that arc, left to right or up and down, is really quite authentic. As small as it might seem, I think this is a huge feature. It's time to talk about where these rudders take a very unique turn. These are the only set of rudders that I know of that operate on load cell brakes. Any sim racers out there will know how important load cell brakes are, but it's pretty much unheard of in the consumer market for flight rudders. Essentially what load cell does is measure pressure rather than travel. Now the pedal does still have travel on it via the springs, which is about 15 to 20 millimeters, but the measurement to the sim, or the information that's transferred to the sim, is load in Newton meters. So it's all about how much pressure you're pushing through the pedal. and this makes it very easy to be consistent and accurate. The pedals will record up to 500 Newton meters of pressure, and this equates to about 50 kilograms of load force. Now you might be thinking the main use case for rudders is in the air. So why would we care about load cell brakes? I reckon that anyone that's more serious about flight simming can spend just as much time on the ground taxiing around airports. So this load cell system for the brakes really comes into its own, replicating a much more true-to-life feel on the brakes. This gets highlighted when, say, you're differential braking. This is when you've got more force on a brake than the other and it helps rotate the plane. Things like this become much more intuitive and you'll gain a real feel for it. One thing I found though was the braking texture was slightly grainy. Now, this might actually be accurate to the real life thing, so if you have any experience in a 172 or a 182 or a GA plane, leave your 2 cents in the comments about that. But to solve this graininess, I put a tiny little bit of lithium grease on the contact point on the back there. This has lasted well for the hours that I've used them, but I do feel that it may need applied a few times a year. Again, this is just my preference. You don't need to do this. I was just looking for a slightly smoother feel on the brakes. So you get that authentic feeling on the brakes. It's clear a lot of thought went into that, and it's probably one of the best features. But what's it like in the air? With the Ruddos, I was able to have my feet closer together than what I can get with any other rudder pedals, and my heels smoothly sliding across the plate for rudder input, and it all just feels right. The one thing to note here is that there's a very slight, let's bring them over, there's a very slight dead zone on the axis in the middle. It's really minor, but it is there. However, when my feet are on the rudder, I can't feel it at all. When I loaded up Microsoft Flight Simulator, the software also had this dead zone reflected in the axis curve. I reached out to Virtual Fly about this and they confirmed this is normal and it's how it should be. This didn't detract from anything for me, but it's important to know some people will prefer it and some won't. It's a pretty personal thing. I did reach out to a pilot friend who spent some time in a GA aircraft and he said some planes can be like this and every plane can be different. Anything with some age on it, especially in the GA space. So maybe it's actually more authentic in that way. Drop something in the comments and tell me what you think about that. One thing I felt with the Ruddos that I've only ever felt with one other set of rudders to this excessive degree was the increased control around the center portion of the axis. It's very easy to make minute inputs, even inputs that feel more like pressure than movement, and have that translate into the sim. Other than that, the load cell brakes, well, they really are the star of the show. After trying these, I think most of the higher end flight sim rudders should have load cell pedals. If you're trying to simulate the whole experience, like parking, navigating taxiways, as well as trying to keep things coordinated in the air, that's where the Ruddos absolutely shine. So now for the software. Here you can see we're in the Virtual Fly Hub, which is Virtual Fly's own software for connecting and calibrating all of the products. And you'll see here that we only have the Ruddos connected at this time. So we can jump in here, we can do some basic calibration, we can calibrate the dead zone, we can calibrate the axes, and there's not really too much more to it than that. As far as the layout and UI goes, you know, it's a nice piece of software, very easy to understand, and I'm sure this is going to be much more handy when you've got multiple Virtual Fly products. Now for the sticky bit, the price. These will set you back 1,100 euros. I think that's about 1,200 USD-ish. Now, they ain't cheap, but they're also for a specific type of simmer. And we'll chat about that after we go through the pros and cons. But before we move on, I do have a discount code that might just take the sting out of it, just a little bit. Use code G-LOC at the checkout to get 10% off your purchase. That's over $100 off, so not a bad deal. So let's round up the pros and the cons, and we'll go through the pros first. Bulletproof build quality. The They really are. They come with a 3-year warranty. Always good to see an extended warranty. They're catered for GA style flying. That's good and bad depending on what you fly. Absolute minimum detent through the middle, barely detectable if anything at all. Adjustable tension through the brakes and the rudder axis by changing out the springs. The load cell brakes, which are an absolute highlight and maybe the main reason you would buy these. The visual design, I think, is absolutely superb. They're very accurate and easy to be accurate around that center point. They auto-detect in Microsoft Flight Simulator and X-Plane, so no need for extra software. And they're FAA approved, so these can be used as part of a training sim build if that's what you're trying to do. And now for the cons, or let's call them drawbacks instead, because I don't think there are any real cons here. So the price is the obvious one, but is that an actual drawback? You know, I'm not so sure. It's certainly a barrier for a lot of simmers though, so we'll leave it in as a drawback. But at the same time, I kind of feel like you're almost getting what you pay for in some sense. I would like to have less of a grainy feeling on the brakes. However, the more I use them, the more this is starting to lessen. And like I said before, a tiny bit of lithium grease does wonders just to smoothen that out a little bit. They do require hard mounting for the best experience, or at least I think so. I just don't know why you would spend so much money on a set of rudders to not have them absolutely locked down. They are designed as a GA rudder now. I had this as part of the pros, but you can't really adapt them to fly choppers, and it might feel slightly unnatural flying large jets, so they are kind of catered to a specific audience. And it really just depends on which side of the fence you fall in terms of flight simulation. Value-wise, with anything like this, in this type of price range, it's going to depend on a few things. First one's budget. Do you have the budget? Now, if you have the budget, that still doesn't mean that these are right for you and the value aspect. Keep in mind this is a serious tool for serious simmers. To get the most out of the rudders, you need to be the type of flight simmer that I would say enjoys the full simulation process. Everything from parking and taxiing around to coordinating turns and your crosswind landings. If that's you, and you love the entire process, then you'll appreciate these and the value add is certainly there. If you're not that type of flight simmer, you're kind of going to be paying a lot of money for something you're just not going to get the full use out of, and it kind of seems a bit of a waste. So final thoughts on the Ruddo by Virtual Fly. Everything about these, from the unboxing experience to getting them set up on the rig and flying with them, it screams high end. The materials and the build quality are some of the best I've seen. It's clear that Virtual Fly have poured their passion for flight simulation into this product. And for the right type of simmer with a healthy budget, let's just say the more that you fly with them, the more you will appreciate them. The key standouts are the GA inspired design and the smooth linear rudder axis. But the biggest draw card is that extra ground control with those load cell brakes. They kind of just steal the show. I would just give yourself a little brain check before pulling the trigger. Make sure you're really that type of flight simmer that enjoys the full process. You enjoy all the groundwork as much as being in the air. If that's you, then I think you will absolutely love these.